So this morning, we begin a brand new series. It's our launch series, and we do this every September, and it's designed to do this, to help shake off the cobwebs of a long, dry, dusty summer and help us get focused on what this next year has. And it's been amazing to watch and be a part of this community for the last 4 or 5 years as God's purpose, His vision for what is going on here, it's becoming easier and easier to see it and to articulate it. So what we're going to start to unpack this morning and bring out for the rest of this month and of course the rest of this year is sort of a roadmap or a guide or a blueprint as to what God is up to here in and through this community and what your part and place is in that. So if I were to draw this out this morning, what our map or blueprint would look like, it would look like this. At the center of who we are and what we do is our mission. And our mission is to join God in the renewal of all things. Then everything else we do ripples out from there. The mission comes to life the farther out that it goes. So if we start in that very first circle, we're talking about our Sunday gatherings. This, what we do here once a week, is our starting point. The next ring out from there is what we call our discipleship elements. That's where you give of yourself and receive from others in smaller, transformative group environments. And we label those things like kids and youth and formation. And we've got about 21 elements currently in operation here as part of our church. Simply put, it's the place where you serve or the place where you are served, or maybe both are happening at the exact same time. And last but not least, the outer ring is something that we introduced last year and talked a little bit about. We've called it neighborhood churches. This is where you integrate what you believe with where you work and where you live and where you play. Because what we have here just can't stay contained to just Sundays, and it's not just with a group of people that we like to hang out with at church. It has to go outwards, beyond into our neighborhoods, into our communities, and into the world. And so we're going to unpack this as the month goes along. And this morning I want to start with that first ring. I want to talk about what it means for the church to gather together. And this morning I would like to tag or dub this gathering a disruptive gathering. And to open that up, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. And before the story, I want to tell you a little bit about me. All right, here's the thing. It's no secret. I'm a terrible traveler. I mean, I'm terrible. I hate traveling. I just don't like it. I don't like long trips, and I don't like short trips. I don't like having to drive for long periods of time. I don't like being the passenger for long periods of time. I'm sad when I travel without my kids, and I hate traveling with my kids because they kick my seat and there's crumbs and just garbage everywhere. It's not good. The temperature is never right. I'm always fiddling with it. I just don't like it. And maybe the worst way to travel for someone like me is traveling by plane, because you're stuck in that seat and there's nothing you can do about it. You're at the mercy of whoever and whatever is happening in that cabin. And this rang really true to me about 6 or 8 months ago. My family and I were coming back from California. We were on a family trip together, and I'm trying to be a good airplane passenger. I'm sitting in my seat. I got the buckle belted up. I got my bag stowed in the seat front, in front of me. And, the lady, the waitress or stewardess, whatever, is doing her signs, and I'm sort of paying attention to that. I've got my phone on airplane mode. Like everything is just the way it should be, right? And then it happened. All of a sudden, there was this smell, or maybe a stench would be a better way to put it, that began to permeate and just float throughout the cabin. And it seemed to get stronger and stronger and stronger until it felt like we were just sitting in this fog, and I was getting so upset because I'm already feeling awkward and I don't like this, and we're about to take off and I'm all buckled in and I'm trying to be a good airplane passenger, but it's not working already because there is this smell that has overtaken the cabin. And here's what I could smell: some really heavy garlic, some onions, a vinegar that was pungent. There's no other way to describe it. And I'm sure there were some capers thrown in on that. That's the smell that started to fill the airplane fuselage. And I'm just wondering, what is going on here? So I start looking around, and then out of the corner of my eye, like half a row back, I see it. there is this lady who has peeled the lid off her nasty Tupperware lunch and has decided to open it up and eat it about a minute before we took off. Why she couldn't have eaten that in the lounge or coming at a time, I don't know why, but she thought it was a really good idea to eat it right then and there when I was stuck in my seat. So what did I do? I took a picture. Now, listen, don't judge me. Don't judge me. And if this is your mother or grandmother or sister or something, I'm super sorry because it was a flight to Saskatoon. Anyways, I take this picture because my family's sitting in the row behind me, and you know how you take a picture of like somebody else, and you're pretending to take a selfie, but you sort of move back and try to grab that thing? So I did that, and I text this picture to my wife, and all I write is, seriously? Question mark, exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation mark. So then my wife and family just start laughing, but I'm still upset. So I think of a friend of mine who travels extensively for work. I know he's in the UK, so I send him a picture of this lady. And I know he's like 8 or 10 or 12 hours ahead of me, but within 30 seconds, he texts back and he writes, "the worst," in big capital letters. And I'm still upset. Then I text a friend in Ontario saying, "See, you see what's going on? This happens to me all the time." And he's like, I know. That lady, by just peeling open that Tupperware, changed everything. Everything came to a standstill. Something had changed. We couldn't continue as business as usual because it was too late for that, because you couldn't get away from that smell. And as the flight continued, I noticed that it was getting onto my clothes, and I walked out with that smell on my sweater as the flight ended. Now check it out. That very same smell of disruption was in the air on the very day that Jesus did this. That walking along the beach of Lake Galilee, Jesus saw two brothers, Simon, later called Peter, and Andrew. And they were fishing, throwing their nets into the lake, and it was their regular work. And Jesus said to them, "Come with me. I'll make you a new kind of fisherman out of you. I'll show you how to catch men and women instead of perch and bass." And they didn't ask questions, but simply dropped their nets and followed. And a short distance down the beach, they came upon another pair of brothers, James and John, Zebedee's sons. And these two were sitting in a boat with their father Zebedee, mending their fish nets. And Jesus made the same offer to them, and they were just as quick to follow, abandoning boat and father. So why would a group of men leave their jobs, abandon their boats and their family at the call of a complete stranger? What is the disruption that's in the air here? What's the shakeup? What is it that made the call of Jesus so irresistible and unavoidable for these people? Well, you got to consider the backstory. These are boys who have now become men. And before they were men, they started in a Jewish boys' school. All the little boys start out in that school. But it's not really a school. What it is a vetting process. Because as the years go on, only the best of the best continue on, and those who can't quite make it sort of drop off the sides. What kind of school, what kind of vetting process is it for? It's to see which of the boys are the best, are good enough to become rabbis, to become religious leaders, to become the teachers of the law. So they would put these boys through this process, and the best of the best would rise to the top, the cream of the crop. And then when they were selected by a rabbi, they were selected as the best students, those who had the goods. Those kids would often leave their mothers and fathers. They would leave their villages and towns. They would leave their friends and family, and they would devote their whole lives to be just like the rabbi that chose them. To do whatever he did, to follow him literally and spiritually, to be his disciples, and to be his apprentices. So in this scene, Jesus is about 30 years old, and at about 30 years of age is when usually rabbis would begin their public ministry and teaching and begin to collect their disciples. And there he is walking the shores of Galilee, and he spots these fishermen. Why are these guys fishermen? Why are they about their family business? Because they aren't anyone's disciples. Because at some point in time, they got dropped off the list. They were vetted out. They weren't good enough. They did not make the cut. But in spite of that, Jesus says to them, follow me. Or actually what they heard was this, hey, you can be like me. So they drop their nets. Why? Because the rabbi believes in them. He believes they can do what he does. There was something in the air that day. There was a smell that they were not expecting to smell. It disrupted that moment, it disrupted their lives, and nothing would ever be the same again. But again, remember, think about the practicality of that scene. Those first disciples were probably teenagers, maybe men in their early 20s, and they're working for their dads. And Jesus asks them, actually doesn't even ask them, he tells them that they are going to change the world just by saying, you come, be like me. And friends, that same call, that same smell of disruption is in the air right here in this room this morning. Why? Because it's our turn. This is our shift to be disciples, to be apprentices, to be the local church. Again, Jesus is saying to you and to me, y'all, all y'all, come. I know you can be just like me. And my hope as one of your pastors this morning is that as this next church season unfolds, you will recognize that you are part of a special moment, in a special place, in a special time, with a special group of people. Because here's what I've come to learn about you. And I've been around the church block at least a dozen times. Not all churches are like this church. I don't know if you know how special this is, this thing that you and I are a part of. And I've noticed it in so many different ways as I've spent time with you and talked with you. I've noticed things like this is the kind of church that is willing and courageous enough to engage with cultural issues and not to simply defend against them. This is the kind of church, a very special kind of church, that's not concerned with just keeping Christians and keeping Christianity safe and making everything okily-dokily. No, this is the kind of church that wants to be on mission with God and take this beautiful risk of making disciples. Friends, I don't know if you get it or see it. I can see it from up here. But this is a very, very, very special place, a very special group of people. Why? Because I've seen it in you. I've heard it in you. I've heard people say things like, Jesus, disrupt me, again and again and again, because I want to be in for whatever you have next. Wherever you lead, I will go. I will follow. So maybe part of that is exactly what you need to hear this morning. That you make the cut. That you have been called out and commissioned. That you have what it takes. And somehow by God's amazing grace, we get to do this next leg of our spiritual journeys together. And that's a beautiful and special thing. But it can't stop there. And maybe we can personalize it just a little bit here. Because when I even hear myself talk right now, I know the words I'm saying, but I know who this person really is. I don't want to be disrupted. I am lazy. I am contentious. I am selfish. I am greedy. I get frustrated very easily, and I want to say, forget about it. Like, I'm done. It's too much work. I'll go do something else. I don't need this kind of hassle, this kind of trouble. And I've had to discipline myself to pray prayers like, Jesus, disrupt me. Disrupt my complacency. Disrupt my greed. Disrupt my selfishness. Because I don't know about you. I'm 42 years old. That means half my life is probably over, if not more, because I have eaten a lot of chicken wings in the last 42 years. A lot. And I want to do something meaningful with the back end of my life. I want to do something that is important. I want to do something that leaves a mark. I want to do something that has some gravity to it. I want to do something good. And my hope and challenge to you this morning is that you would feel the same way, that you would ask Jesus to disrupt you from whatever regular, normal patterns you are locked into, and that you would be in tune to saying, yeah, I'm going to take this time that I have left to do some damage for his kingdom. This is the attitude that we are called towards, friends, because anything less than that looks a lot more like this. And maybe you caught this story from earlier this year. But one of the most lavishly funded gadget startups in Silicon Valley last year was Juicero Incorporated. It makes a juice machine. The product was an unlikely pick for top technology investors, but they were drawn to the idea of an internet-connected device that transforms single-serving packets of chopped fruit and vegetables into a refreshing and healthy beverage. Doug Evans, the company's founder, would compare himself with Steve Jobs in his pursuit of juicing perfection. He declared that his juice press wields 4 tons of force, enough to lift 2 Teslas, he said. Google's venture capital arm and other backers poured about $120 million into this startup. Juicero sells the machine for $400, plus the cost of individual juice packs delivered weekly. Tech blogs have dubbed it a Keurig for juice. But after the product hit the market, some investors were surprised to discover a much cheaper alternative. You can squeeze the Juicero bags with your bare hands. 2 backers said the final device was bulkier than what was originally pitched, and that they were puzzled to find that customers could achieve similar results without it. Bloomberg performed its own press test, pitting a Juicero machine against a reporter's grip. And the experiment found that squeezing the bag yields nearly the same amount of juice just as quickly, and in some cases, faster than using the device. Juicero declined to comment. You want to see what it looks like? You want to see what a $400 juicer looks like that was originally $700? It looks like this. So basically, it's an electronic vice grip. You put the bag in, you just shut the door, and it just squeezes a bag of juice. That's all it does. But why is it? Why is it that products like this grab our attention? And not just our attention, but $120 million worth of attention. And listen, I'm not a grump. I'm kind of a grump. But I'm okay with new ideas and progress and making our lives better. I'm cool with that. But this is something different. I think a product like this says a little bit more of what we have become as a culture and as a society. So if I was going to play armchair psychotherapist this morning and scratch the surface a little bit, I would say part of the success of a device like this is just our sheer laziness, right? So if we had to describe it, we would say, oh, well, I don't want to have to juice my own juice. Why do I have to do it? That's a complete reenactment of one of my kids right there. Why do I got to do this? That's too much work, man. It could be that, straight laziness. Or maybe the success of this product is more based on fear. So the reaction would be, I can't do it. I can't press my own juice, man. Do you think I'm a rocket scientist or something? I can't do this. I'm afraid to do it myself. Or maybe if we scratch a little bit deeper, it's this. Maybe it's because, as a culture, we want to avoid any sort of friction, any sort of discomfort, and any sort of disruption. So if we were to play it up this morning, it would be like saying, I can't bear a life where I have to press my own juice. And when we say it that way, it sounds silly, right? And it makes me feel a little bit foolish. And I feel like when we choose things like this, when we choose the path of least resistance, what we're actually doing is robbing ourselves of life itself. Because you know where life actually happens? In the friction parts, in the gritty parts, where you bang up against one another, love, hate, kiss, make up, and do it all over again. The challenge for us is this, though. It's not just the Juicero that's doing it. It feels like so many different parts of life are trying to lull us into this very soft complacency and trying to make everything so easy that there's no resistance whatsoever. And when that happens, That puts us in another dangerous spot. Here's a tweet that came by this week. I thought it was funny, mostly because the handle is Startup L. Jackson, and that's Samuel L. Jackson's Pulp Fiction afro up there. But he says this: the Uberification of everything. And Uber is that sort of homemade taxi service, right? You sort of text someone and they come pick you up. The Uberification of everything is turning San Francisco into an assisted living community for the young. Hashtag young is the new old. It's ridiculous. But you know it's happening, right? You can feel it happening. And if we're not too careful, we could easily replace the word San Francisco with Lakeview Church. Because very easily, a church like ours could be an assisted living community for capable Christians. That you actually have the tools, you actually have the means, you actually have the call, but you just wait for someone else to help you and guide you just to do it for you. Is that who we're going to be, or are we going to be something else? Because I think it's in that something else where this story of Jesus calling his first disciples continues to disrupt us today. Not only does Jesus choose you, not only does he think that you have what it takes, but he also wants you to get dirty. You know why? Because there's no other way to do it. Jesus is calling you to risk. Risk yourself, risk your time, risk your resources, risk everything about you. Jesus is calling you in your calling and commissioning to put yourself out there, to do things you feel uncomfortable with, things that might make you afraid, things that might shake you out of your laziness. In your calling, in your commission, Jesus is calling you to give and give and give and give again and give until it hurts. Jesus is calling you to actually do what you have been called to do. We have a collective calling as a local church, but there's also very specific tasks as God has you as his undercover agents everywhere. This is what it means to answer that call. And if for some reason this morning you are worried that you're still not good enough or that you just don't know enough to actually follow through on this God stuff, let me say this to you this morning. That historically, Christian spirituality has always been understood as a religion of amateurs. You are all amateurs. Every one of you is a hack. You are all rookies, and the greatest hack is standing right here. We are all figuring this out as we go along. And that is why we intentionally take time out every 7 days for an hour, 2 hours, to gather together, to reorient our hearts and minds, and to remind ourselves of who God is and the summons that is on our lives. And we need that. And here's why. That our histories from Monday to Friday have built up in us a wall of unbelief at the possibility of any order strong enough to revoke our chaos. Simply put, when we meet together like this on Sundays, it becomes a disruptive environment. When we bring all the ingredients and all the pieces together, the music, the scriptures, the shaking hands, the hanging out, the kid stuff, the eating together, that's not like us peeling the lid off of that lady's Tupperware. The garlic, the onion, the pungent vinegar, the capers, it fills the room, it disrupts it, and all those ingredients come together and are designed to disrupt us in this moment and to get all over our clothes so that we carry it with us throughout the week. Because the truth that we remind ourselves of on Sundays actually undoes the lies that try to shape us between Monday and Friday. So you and I intentionally gather together in this way to remind ourselves of the best story ever, and that the best story wins. And friends, that story is the story that we have adopted as our own. It's a story of a God who summons us. It's a story that says that you are believed in and included. And the plot of this story isn't about your shortcomings. No, the plot of this story is actually about your acceptance. And that makes this story a story of disruption. It's an awakening to a new way of being, a new way of seeing ourselves and this world, where you recognize that you have what it takes and that you have to do it the hard way because that's the only way that it works. And here is my promise to you as we wrap this up and invite the band to come forward. My promise to you is this, is that every 7 days in this place, we will do our very best to create a disruptive environment, a sacred space in this very time slot to empower and to encourage you to live out your summons between Sundays. Again, always remembering that Sundays is actually where we start. This isn't where we stop. This isn't the goal or the climax. We do this very important piece because it gives us the courage that we need to drop our nets and to actually follow Jesus.